There's a second group of people on the elite that want to denigrate or destroy or do away with citizenship. I'd call them the evolutionaries. These are not just the permanent. These are people who feel that human nature is malleable, it changes, it's not fixed. And with greater resources, nutrition, therapy, education, you can make a new human. And if you have a new human, you don't need an old constitution. This was written by a bunch of old white men who were, some of them were slave owners, they were in a different era, they weren't educated, they didn't have iPads and iPhones, they weren't sophisticated and wouldn't know how to use Google if you brought them back here. So we just need to junk that. And if it's not just the Constitution, it's 150, 180 years of tradition. So no sooner did this progressive movement take power and they realized we do not have public support. We came in through the COVID crisis and a lot of things that happened in that terrible year 2020. So we've got to change the system. Now, we talked about changing the demography, but they said, first thing, we've got to get rid of a 233-year-old electoral college without any discussion of what it was for. If you read the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, it was to disperse political power so that people would go to rural areas, because the founders had a great distrust of what people are capable living en masse in crowded conditions, and they're prone to rumor and spites of madness and frenzies, and somebody who was a cattle rancher or a farmer might be a check on them. Or they thought if there was going to be fraud, you couldn't accomplish it with a single national election that would be broken up in the states, and they might check. They give various reasons. They wanted immediately to get rid of a 150-year tradition of a 9-person court. Would they have done that if Donald Trump had not appointed 3 judges? No. They want to pack the court. Pack the court, when we were, all of us in college, was a dirty word that referred to Franklin Roosevelt's 1937 scheme that was roundly denounced by his own party. Nobody mentioned it. There is a website, Pack the Court, and it's a term of approbation, celebration. There are a lot of arguments for a 180-year filibuster. The only argument I can see that's being adduced to end it now is we're out of power, we want to ram. We're in power, we want to ram this through, and we don't really care because nobody would be crazy enough to give us power again, so we only have 2 more years. That is changing the system. We've had for almost 70 years, 50 states. It's not in the Constitution, but it's a tradition, it's a custom. Why all of a sudden would we want to put Puerto Rico and D.C., that's a federated provincial idea, it's the idea that it wouldn't be partisan where the capital is. Why would we want to make those states other than to give them 2 representatives and 4 senators and then be able to push through legislation in the near term? It is in the Constitution that the primary responsibility of voting is the responsibility, even in national elections, of the states. And you know, in Michigan, we vote different than you do in California, different hours, but the idea is that unless it's egregious, or unless the federal government feels it's something of national concern, like women's suffrage or the 18-year-old vote, the federal government keeps out. Not now. The first effort is to nationalize voting. And why would that be? Because for the first time in history, 62% of the electorate voted not on election day. And the error rate for an absentee ballot and an early ballot traditionally had been 4 to 5%. Mysteriously, it went down to 0.4, even as more ballots were cast. That's a magnitude of 10. On 102 million ballots, that could be 4 or 5 million ballots. If they were placed in the right states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Arizona, Georgia, they could affect the outcome. Indeed, Mark Zuckerberg believed that because he put $500 million to enhance local precinct workers in these states. And so now we're tampering with the Constitution and trying to push through a national voters' law. So this is a very dangerous idea that you're going to evolve the government in our year of wisdom. Suddenly in 2021, we discovered that we were geniuses and the prior generations were idiots, and we're going to change the system because it didn't work for us. And now we have a brief glimpse of power.